I looked at my empty house for the last time. 42 years of my life packed into cardboard boxes and garbage bags. I had to give away or throw away half of my belongings. There simply wouldn't be room for them in Aiden's house. The furniture went for next to nothing at a garage sale. Nancy, the local real estate agent, promised that the house would sell quickly. It was in a good neighborhood, and the price was reasonable. "A great option for a young family," she said, not noticing the irony of her words. Once upon a time, this house was a great option for Howard and me. Howard died 6 years ago. A heart attack right in the supermarket between the cereal and canned soup aisles. We were going fishing that weekend. His fishing rods are still in the garage, untouched since that day. The ring of my cell phone snapped me out of my memories. "Mom, where are you?" Aiden's voice sounded annoyed. "Haley says dinner will be ready in an hour." "I'm on my way, dear. I'm just saying goodbye to the house." "Jesus, Mom." He didn't try to hide his impatience. "It's just walls and a roof." "You wanted to move." "Did I?" After Howard died, the house seemed too big and empty, but I had grown accustomed to the quiet, to the freedom to do what I wanted, when I wanted, to not having to answer to anyone. Moving in with Aiden was a practical solution. That's what my children said. That's what I told myself. "I'll be there soon," I said, and hung up. One last look at the garden roses Howard planted on our 20th anniversary. One last click of the light switch. One last turn of the key in the lock. $250,000. That was how much my house was worth. Most of that money went toward paying off Aiden's mortgage. "It's the best investment, Mom," he said. "Why pay a landlord when you can help your family?" I divided the rest between Aiden and Octavia. They each received $40,000. I kept only $20,000 for myself, for a rainy day. My children assured me that I had nothing to worry about. I would live with Aiden's family, and they would take care of me. Octavia lives in Phoenix, 4 hours away. I offered to move in with her, but she quickly declined. "We don't have enough room, Mom, and Trenton works from home. He needs quiet." Aiden's house in the suburbs of Las Vegas greeted me with noise and chaos. Reed was chasing the dog around the living room, Haley was yelling at him from the kitchen, and Willow was buried in her phone, listening to loud music on her headphones. "Bah!" Willow was the first to notice me and rushed over to hug me. "You're finally here. I thought Dad was going to bring you in the trunk." "Willow, don't say that," I automatically scolded my granddaughter, but deep down I was grateful for her sincere joy. At 17, she was the only one who seemed genuinely happy to see me. Aiden dragged my 2 bags in and set them down in the hallway. "Welcome home, Mom. Your room is upstairs, last door down the hall. It used to be a storage room, but we cleared it out." A storage room? Of course. In a 4-bedroom house, the only room they could find for me was a converted storage room. I nodded silently and reached for my bags. "I'll help," Willow said, picking up the heaviest one. "You'll like it, Mom. I hung up the pictures you gave me last time." The room was tiny. A single bed, a nightstand, and a narrow wardrobe took up almost all the space. The window faced a blank wall of the neighboring house. There were indeed photos hanging on the wall, me with Howard on our wedding day, little Aiden on his first bike, newborn Octavia in her grandmother's arms. "Thank you, sweetie," I hugged Willow. "It's very cozy." "Haley wanted to put a treadmill here," my granddaughter said confidentially, "but Dad said you paid for the house, so you're entitled to a room." I felt something tighten inside me. Entitled to a room the size of a closet, in a house I paid for. "Dinner's in 15 minutes," Haley called from downstairs. "Reed, stop chasing the dog. Miriam, are you settled in?" Miriam. Not Mom or even Miriam, are you settled in? Just Miriam, as if I were a lodger. "Yes, thank you," I replied, trying to sound cheerful. Dinner was strange. Haley had made lasagna, not my favorite quiche Lorraine, which I had mentioned last time, but spicy lasagna with lots of chili peppers, which I can't stand. "Oh, I forgot you don't eat spicy food," she said, with feigned regret. I smiled and said that salad would be enough. "So, Mom, how does it feel to be free of a mortgage?" Aiden asked, helping himself to a second helping. "Strange," I replied honestly. "I'm used to my house. But now you don't have to worry about bills, repairs, and all that stuff." He smiled broadly. We'll take care of everything. Speaking of bills, Haley chimed in, Aiden, did you pay for your car insurance? Not yet, he hesitated. I was thinking of using some of Mom's money. Of course, I nodded. That's what I gave it to you for. It's great that you moved in with us, Grandma, said Reed, without looking up from his phone. Now you can pick me up from school when Mom's at work. And cook dinner, added Haley. I often have to stay late at the clinic. And walk Rex. Reed nodded toward the dog begging for food under the table. He loves long walks. I smiled and nodded. Of course, I'd help with the housework. Of course, I'd pick Reed up from school. Of course, I'd cook and clean. I was part of the family. They needed me. But something inside me grew colder with every passing minute. This didn't feel like, we'll take care of you, Mom. It felt more like, you'll be useful while you can. After dinner, I helped Haley with the dishes, even though she didn't ask. It was a habit I'd developed over the years. In the house Howard and I shared, I always cleared the table and washed the dishes while he put everything away. Haley didn't seem to notice my help. She was talking on the phone with a friend, holding the receiver between her ear and her shoulder and giggling periodically. Yes, we finally got rid of her house. Now that money is working for us instead of sitting dead in real estate. No, she's fine with it. She suggested it herself. Sure, we'll have to make some sacrifices, but we'll save on a nanny and a housekeeper. Haley didn't lower her voice, as if she didn't notice me or didn't think I would be offended. I rinsed the last plate and quietly left the kitchen. In the living room, Aiden was watching a basketball game sprawled out on the couch. Reed sat next to him, buried in his tablet. Neither of them even looked up when I walked by. In my tiny room, I finally allowed myself to sit down and breathe. On the bedside table was a photo of Howard, his favorite picture, taken on a fishing trip. He was smiling at the camera, proudly holding his catch. "What would you do, dear?" I whispered, looking at his smiling face. Howard had always been generous with the children. When Aiden went to college, we paid for his tuition in full, even though it meant putting our dream of traveling to Europe on hold. When Octavia decided to buy her first home, we gave her the money for the down payment. Howard never hesitated. "We're parents, Mary," he would say. "It's our job to help them get on their feet." And I continued to help after he died. When Aiden lost his job 3 years ago, I paid his mortgage for 6 months. When Octavia needed money for Finley's medical bills, I didn't hesitate to give her my savings. I never asked for the money back. I never even called it a debt. Isn't that what parents are for? But now, looking at the tiny room, listening to Haley's muffled laughter and the commentary on the TV, I wondered for the first time, what have the children done for me? My pension was modest. Howard's life insurance had long since been spent on the children's needs. The house where I could have lived out my days had been sold, and the money given to my son. My savings were almost gone. And here I was, in a converted storage room, planning how I would pick up my grandson from school and walk the dog. "You notice more than you show," Howard often told me. He valued my observant nature, my ability to see through people but remain diplomatic. Now that ability was screaming danger. But what could I do? Where could I go? I no longer had a home of my own. My money had slipped through my fingers. There was only one thing left to do: be useful. Be a good mother and grandmother. Don't be a burden. I made the bed and lay down without turning off the nightlight. It was strange to fall asleep in a new place, hearing unfamiliar sounds. Aiden snoring behind the wall, Haley's footsteps in the bathroom, music from Willow's room. I lay awake until late into the night, remembering all the times I had helped my children. A loan for Aiden's first car, Octavia's wedding dress, braces for Willow, sports camp for Reed. I never considered that money wasted. I was proud that I could help. But was there anyone who was proud to be able to help me? The morning started early and noisy. Haley knocked on my door at 6:30. "Miriam, could you make sure the kids eat breakfast? I have to rush to the clinic, emergency patient." I nodded, got dressed quickly, and went down to the kitchen. Reed was still asleep, and Willow was sitting at the table with a cup of coffee. "Good morning, Grandma," she smiled. "Would you like some coffee? I just made some." "I'd love some," I said, sitting down next to her. "Did your mom leave for work?" "Yeah." Willow rolled her eyes. "Emergency patient." She always says that when she wants to avoid the morning rush. In reality, her appointment isn't until 9. I didn't say anything, but I made a mental note of that information. So Haley had lied to get me to do her morning chores. "Do you like your room?" Willow asked, looking at me intently. "It's cozy," I replied diplomatically. "Dad said we could have the guest room, but Mom insisted it had to be her creative studio," Willow said, making quotation marks in the air with her fingers. "Although she doesn't create anything, she just stores junk from sales there." I remained silent again. There was no point in involving her in my problems. "I can give you my room," she suddenly offered. "It's bigger and has a normal window." "Don't even think about it," I stroked her arm. "You need your own space. Besides, I don't spend much time in my bedroom." Waking Reed up proved to be a real challenge. The teenager stubbornly ignored the alarm clock and my cautious attempts to nudge him awake. In the end, I had to turn on the light and literally pull the blanket off him. "God, Grandma, let me sleep," he muttered, pulling the blanket back over himself. "It's already 7:30, Reed. You'll be late for school." "So what?" He turned his back to me. "First class sucks." I sighed and tried a different tactic. "If you get up now, I'll have time to make you waffles." It worked. 15 minutes later, Reed was sitting at the table devouring waffles with maple syrup. He didn't say thank you, but at least he was ready for school on time. Aiden came downstairs last, already fully dressed. "Good morning, Mom." He kissed me on the cheek as he passed. "Great, you made breakfast. Did Haley tell you she left early?" "Yes," I said, setting a plate of waffles in front of him. "Emergency patient." "Yeah, right," he snorted, clearly not believing that excuse any more than Willow did. "Listen, Mom, could you stop by the grocery store after you drop Reed off? The fridge is almost empty." "Sure," I nodded. "Will you give me a list?" "Haley usually just takes a little of everything," Aiden shrugged. "And by the way, can you pay with your card? I'll pay you back on Friday after I get paid." I nodded again. 6 years after Howard's death, I had been living alone and taking care of everything by myself. I cooked, cleaned, drove, paid the bills. But for some reason, Aiden was talking to me as if I were a helpless old woman who needed precise instructions to go to the store. "By the way, Mom sent a message," Reed said suddenly, looking at his phone. "She wants you to buy her a new moisturizer from that TV commercial, the one that costs $80. I almost choked on my coffee. $80 for cream? When I lived alone, I saved on everything, including cosmetics. My $12 moisturizer from the supermarket was a far cry from such luxuries. "Okay," I said, mentally calculating how much would be left on my card after all these purchases. The day passed in a flurry of activity. I took Reed to school, bought groceries, including cream for Haley, made lunch, walked the dog, did the laundry, and dusted the entire house. No one asked me to do any of this, but I felt like I had to be useful, like I had to justify my presence here. That evening, when the whole family gathered for dinner, which I had prepared, Aiden announced the news. "Haley and I have decided to go to San Diego for the weekend," he said, helping himself to some roast. "Mom, you'll watch the kids, right?" It wasn't a question. It was a statement that didn't allow for refusal. "Of course," I smiled. "Is it your anniversary?" "No, we just want to get away." Haley didn't even look up from her phone. "By the way, thanks for the cream, Miriam. Did you find the right one?" "Yes, no problem." "Great. And since you'll be home with the kids anyway, could you make sure Reed does his science project? It has to be done by Monday." I nodded, but something inside me flinched. It had only been 2 days since I moved in, and I had already become a free babysitter, housekeeper, and walking wallet. Was this what I sold my house and gave away all my savings for? But I kept smiling and nodding. "You notice more than you show." Howard's voice echoed in my head again. Yes, I noticed, and I was beginning to realize that I had made a mistake, but I didn't know what to do about it yet. The morning after the family dinner was cloudy. I sat by the window of our extension with a mug of tea and watched the gray clouds slowly creep across the sky. Garland had gone to the neighbor's garage to help repair an old Harley. I was glad he had found something to do. Lately, I had noticed him staring into space more and more, as if lost in his thoughts. I couldn't get last night out of my head. I replayed the conversation over and over in my head, feeling something like anger building inside me. It was an unfamiliar feeling. I was used to swallowing my resentment, finding excuses for my children's behavior, convincing myself that things weren't so bad. My phone vibrated on the table. It was a message from Heather with a link to pay for the curtains. "Don't forget, Mom, they have to arrive by Friday." I put the phone down without responding. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel compelled to rush to fulfill their requests. The doorbell snapped me out of my thoughts. Standing on the doorstep was Jillian Morrow, my neighbor and perhaps my only real friend. She was holding a basket with something covered by a checkered towel. "Hi, dear." Jillian smiled. "I baked some blueberry muffins and thought we could have a cup of coffee." I let her in and put the kettle on. Jillian was her usual energetic and straightforward self. At 67, she looked younger than me, fit, with short, bright red hair and lively green eyes. "You look awful," she said, sitting down at our tiny table. "What happened?" I smiled involuntarily. That was why I loved Jillian. No social niceties, just honesty. "I had a family dinner last night," I began, setting out the cups. "Oh, your family dinners?" Jillian rolled her eyes. "Every time after one of those, you look like you've been through a war." I sighed and told her about last night, about the conversation about Kenneth's birthday, the curtains, the catering, and everything else. Jillian listened silently, her face growing darker. "Marilyn," she said finally, "do you realize that this is completely abnormal?" "What exactly?" I asked, even though I already knew the answer deep down. "Everything," she exclaimed. "The way they treat you, how they use you, how they squeeze money out of you. Marilyn, they literally kicked you and Garland out of your own home and into this hovel. And now they don't even want to see you at your grandson's birthday party." I lowered my eyes. When someone else said it out loud, it sounded truly awful. "They're not bad people, Jill," I said quietly. "They're just used to me always helping them." "No, dear," Jillian shook her head. "They're not used to it. They deliberately take advantage of your kindness. It's called exploitation and manipulation. And if you think they don't know what they're doing, you're wrong." I felt a lump rise in my throat. Deep down, I knew Jillian was right, but it hurt to admit it. "Listen," she continued more gently, "I know you love your children, but love shouldn't destroy you. What's happening now isn't love, Marilyn. It's some kind of twisted sense of duty. What do you suggest?" I asked bitterly. "Kick them out? They're my children. They have families, children." "Adult children," Jillian reminded me, "with jobs, salaries, and perfectly capable of living on their own, like all normal people their age." She was right. Prescott was 42 and a manager at a large construction company. Laurel was 38 and worked as an administrator at a dental clinic. Their spouses also worked. They could easily support themselves and their children, as most families do. "You know what strikes me the most?" Jillian said, sipping her coffee. "That Garland puts up with it all. He's always been a soft man, but to this extent." I sighed. Garland. My sweet, quiet, non-confrontational husband. He preferred to give in rather than argue. Perhaps if he had been more assertive, we wouldn't be in this situation. "He just wants everyone to be happy," I said, defending him. "What about you? Are you happy, Marilyn?" That simple question caught me off guard. When was the last time I had thought about my own happiness? Years, probably. My entire existence revolved around the needs of my family, solving their problems, meeting their demands. I don't know," I replied honestly. Jillian covered my hand with hers. "You're 63, dear. You deserve peace and respect, not some miserable annex and endless bills for the whims of your grown children." We fell silent, each lost in our own thoughts. Rain began to fall outside, tapping on the roof of our addition, the same roof that needed repairs last summer, but the money went toward Prescott's new pickup truck. "You know," Jillian said suddenly, "I have a lawyer I know. He's a good family lawyer. Maybe you should talk to him." "Why?" I asked, surprised. "I'm not going to take my own children to court." "You don't have to take it to court," Jillian explained, "but you should know your rights. It's your house, Marilyn. Legally, it's yours and Garland's. You have every right to decide who lives there." I shook my head, but the seed of doubt had already been planted. What if Jillian was right? What if it was time to stop sacrificing myself for ungrateful children? "I'll think about it," I said finally. "Here's his card," Jillian said, pulling it out of her purse. "Give him a call. Just find out what your options are, nothing more." I took the card and placed it on the table. Raymond Foster, family and housing lawyer. A phone number written in neat handwriting. Jillian left around noon, leaving me half her cupcakes and a lot of worrying thoughts. I sat there staring at the card, remembering. I remembered how 5 years ago Prescott had come to us with Heather and the kids, saying they were being evicted from their apartment because the owner had decided to sell the house. How they asked to stay with us just for a couple of months until they found something suitable. How those couple of months stretched into a year. I remembered how Laurel and her husband and children also asked to stay with us because rent is so expensive, and they were trying to save up for a down payment on their own place. How Garland and I moved into the annex to make room for them in the main house. How this temporary move stretched into 3 years. I remembered all the times the children asked for money, for repairs, for cars, for their grandchildren's school, for vacations. How we gave away our savings, put our plans on hold, sacrificed our comfort. And what did we get in return? Disrespect, contempt, the feeling that we were a nuisance in our own home. The door opened and Garland came in, shaking the rain off his jacket. "It's pouring," he said, taking off his shoes. "How are you, Mary?" I looked at my husband. His gray hair, the wrinkles around his eyes, his hands calloused from working with tools. My Garland, who had worked all his life to provide for his family, now huddled in an extension to his own house. "Garland," I said quietly, "we need to talk." He sat down opposite me, and I told him about Jillian's visit, about what she had said, about the lawyer. To my surprise, Garland didn't argue or try to persuade me to take it slowly, as he usually did. "I think she's right, Mary," he said simply. "This can't go on." I looked at him in surprise. "But you never said that before. You always said we had to help the children." "Help, yes," he nodded, "but not let them walk all over us. I thought it was temporary, that they would appreciate our help and become more independent. But every year it gets worse." I couldn't believe my ears. My always accommodating husband was suddenly saying things I had only begun to think. "Last night," he continued, "when they said they didn't want us at Kenneth's birthday party, I realized we weren't parents to them. We're ATMs and free babysitters. And you know what? I'm tired, Mary. I'm 65 years old. I want to spend the rest of my life in my house, sleeping in my bed, sitting in my chair, not hiding in the shed to fix a motorcycle." His words hit me right in the heart, because I felt the same way. Tired, disappointed, wanting my life back. "What should we do?" I asked. "Call that lawyer," Garland said firmly. "Find out what our rights are. Then we'll decide together what to do next." I nodded and picked up the phone. Garland's sudden determination gave me strength. I dialed the number on the card. "Foster Law Office, how can I help you?" "Hello?" said a pleasant female voice. "Hello," I said. "My name is Marilyn Thorpe. Jillian Morrow gave me your number. I need some advice on a housing issue." "Of course, Mrs. Thorpe. Mr. Foster can see you tomorrow at 10 in the morning." "Would that be convenient?" I glanced at Garland. He nodded. "Yes, that would be fine. Thank you." I hung up and felt a strange sense of relief. It was as if, for the first time in years, I had done something for myself rather than for the children. The rest of the day passed quietly. I waited for calls or messages from the children about curtains, catering, or something else they needed. But the phone remained silent. Perhaps they had decided to give me time to cool off after yesterday. Or more likely, they were too busy with their own lives to think about my state of mind. That evening, as Garland and I sat down to dinner in our cramped addition, I remembered something else. "You know what I was thinking about today?" I said. "How Prescott reacted when we told him we wanted to go on a cruise for our 40th anniversary." Garland grimaced. 3 years ago, we had planned a week-long cruise. Nothing extravagant, just a little getaway for the two of us. We had been saving up for it for almost a year. He said it was a waste of money, Garland recalled, that at our age, it was too late to live it up. "And then Kenneth needed a new laptop for school," I added, "and we gave the money for that. We didn't even discuss it." "Remember how Laurel threw a tantrum when we said we wanted to sell the old car?" Garland continued, "even though we hardly ever used it and we needed the money. "How can you be so selfish?" I quoted. "You don't need that car, and Zach is about to get his license." We looked at each other and suddenly burst out laughing. It was the bitter laughter of prisoners who had suddenly realized the absurdity of their imprisonment. "God, Mary," Garland said, wiping away tears of laughter. "How did we get to this?" "I don't know," I replied honestly. "Probably a little at a time, day after day, concession after concession. We tried so hard to be good parents that we forgot about ourselves." We sat for a long time, remembering all the times our children had manipulated us, taken advantage of our kindness, taken without giving anything in return. Each memory was like another brick in the wall of awareness that was growing between our past and our future. "Tomorrow," Garland said as we were getting ready for bed, "we're going to see a lawyer and find out our rights, and then we'll make a decision. Together." I nodded, feeling a strange mixture of fear and determination. Fear of conflict, of the unknown, of the possibility of ruining my relationship with my children for good, and determination to finally do something for myself and Garland, to regain control of my life. The next morning, we dressed up. I put on my best suit, a dark blue one I usually save for special occasions. Garland chose his best pants and shirt and even put on a tie. We looked like people going to an important meeting that could change their lives, which in fact was true. Raymond Foster's office was located in a small business center in the center of Redwood Springs. Nothing fancy, just a spacious reception area with couches and a reception desk and a few offices. We were greeted by a friendly, middle-aged woman who introduced herself as Beverly and showed us into the lawyer's office. Raymond Foster was a man in his 50s with piercing dark eyes and a calm manner. He shook our hands and invited us to sit down. "So, Mr. and Mrs. Thorpe," he said, opening a notebook, "Jillian has given me a general outline of your situation, but I would like to hear the details from you." Garland and I exchanged glances, and I began to tell him how 5 years ago we had let our children live with us temporarily, how we had moved into an extension, how we continued to pay the bills for a house we didn't actually live in, how the children treated us, how they spent our money, how they didn't respect our wishes. Foster listened attentively, occasionally making notes in his notebook. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair and folded his arms across his chest. "Is the house in both your names?" he asked. "Yes," Garland replied. "We bought it 30 years ago. We paid off the mortgage 20 years ago. Are there any documents confirming the children's right to live in the house? A lease, a cohabitation agreement?" We shook our heads. "No, it was all verbal," I said. We're a family." Foster nodded as if he had expected that answer. "In that case, from a legal standpoint, the situation is quite simple," he said. "The house belongs to you. You have every right to decide who lives there. If you want your children to move out, they are obliged to do so." "What if they refuse?" asked Garland. "Then you have the right to file a formal eviction notice," replied Foster. "In our state, this is done through the magistrate's court. Once they receive the notice, they will have 30 days to vacate the premises. If they do not do so voluntarily, the court can issue a writ of eviction, which will be enforced by the sheriff." I felt my throat go dry. The thought of my children being evicted from their home by the sheriff was too much. "But I hope it won't come to that," Foster continued, noticing my state. "Usually, an official notice is enough to make people understand the seriousness of the situation. We don't want to throw them out on the street," I said. We want to go back to our home, to live a normal life with respect." "I understand," Foster nodded, "and I would advise you to start with a conversation. Explain to the children how you feel, what you want, give them time to prepare, to find another place to live. But at the same time, be firm. This is your home, and you have a right to live there." "What if they start manipulating us again?" Garland asked. "Saying they have nowhere to go, that we're abandoning them?" "Then you can resort to formal notice," Foster replied. "Sometimes people need a formal document to realize the reality of the situation." He took a folder out of his desk drawer and handed it to us. "Here is a sample eviction notice and instructions on how to fill it out," he said. "I hope you won't have to use it, but it's better to be prepared." I took the folder, feeling its weight in my hands. It was a weapon, the last resort we could turn to if everything else failed. "Thank you, Mr. Foster," I said. You've been very helpful. One more thing, the lawyer added. You mentioned that you pay all the bills for the house. I would recommend reviewing that situation. If your children are adults with jobs, they should be contributing their share of the expenses. Garland and I exchanged glances. It made sense, but for some reason it had never occurred to us. And one last thing, Foster said as he stood up. Don't feel guilty. You're not doing anything wrong. You're just restoring justice. We left the office with a folder of documents and a new sense of confidence. The sun peeked out from behind the clouds as if nature approved of our decision. What now? Asked Garland as we got into the car. I looked at the folder with the documents, then at my husband. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I wasn't a victim, but a person in control of my life. Now, I said firmly, we're going home, and we're going to have a serious talk with our children. Garland and I hardly spoke on the way home. We were both lost in our own thoughts, digesting the information we had received from Foster's lawyer. I held the folder with the documents tightly, as if it were a lifeline in the stormy sea of our family relationships. We parked at the house, our house, and sat in the car for a while, just looking at it. The big 2-story house with a porch that we had bought 30 years ago, dreaming of a happy family life. Prescott was 12 then, and Laurel was only 4. We were so happy to move out of our cramped apartment into our own house with a yard. I remembered the day we got the keys, how Prescott ran through the rooms choosing his favorite, how Laurel twirled around in the backyard, reveling in the space. Garland put his arm around my shoulders and said, "We did it, Mary. We have our own house." Now, 30 years later, we were sitting in the car, gathering our courage to defend our right to live in our own home. "Let's talk to them first," Garland said. "Let's explain the situation and give them a chance to make things right." I nodded. Despite our determination, the thought of conflict with our children caused me physical pain. "Okay, let's try tonight when everyone's home." We got out of the car and headed for the annex. On the way, I noticed that Prescott had set up an inflatable pool for the kids on the lawn, right where my rose garden used to be, without asking permission, of course, as always. The day dragged on. I tried to distract myself with household chores, but my thoughts kept returning to the upcoming conversation. How would the children react? Would they understand us? Or would this be the end of our relationship? At 4 o'clock, Heather came home from work. I heard her car door slam, then her footsteps on the porch. 15 minutes later, Prescott arrived. His pickup truck roared loudly, drowning out the birdsong. Half an hour later, Laurel and Dwayne showed up. They had picked up the children from school. The house filled with noise. Voices, footsteps, doors slamming, music from Kenneth's room. It was a typical evening at the Thorpe house. Only today, everything was about to change. At 6 o'clock, Garland knocked on the door of my small bedroom. "Are you ready?" he asked quietly. I nodded, though I felt my stomach clench with fear. We left the annex and headed for the main house. I carried a folder with documents, just in case. Laurel opened the door when we knocked. She looked surprised. "Mom, Dad, is something wrong?" "We need to talk," Garland said firmly. "All of you." Laurel frowned but stepped aside to let us in. Heather was cooking dinner in the kitchen, and Prescott was sitting at the table with his laptop. Dwayne was watching TV in the living room. "Can I have everyone here for a minute?" Garland asked loudly. "We have something important to discuss." They gathered in the living room, looking at us with confusion. The children stayed upstairs. I could hear their footsteps and voices. "What's going on?" Prescott asked. "We're about to have dinner." "This is more important than dinner," I said, surprised at the firmness of my voice. "Your father and I have made a decision." I took a deep breath and looked at their faces, so familiar and yet so foreign. "We're going back to our house," I said simply, "the main house, and you'll have to find another place to live." There was a silence so deep that I could hear the clock ticking on the wall and the distant voices of children upstairs. "What?" Laurel was the first to break the silence. "You're joking, right?" "No," Garland replied. "We're absolutely serious." "But why?" Heather looked genuinely confused. "What happened?" "What happened," Garland said, "is that we're tired of living in an extension of our own house, tired of paying all the bills while you spend your money on new cars and curtains, tired of not being respected in our own home. Dad, don't be dramatic. Prescott rolled his eyes. No one disrespects you. It's just more convenient for you at your age to live in the annex. Fewer stairs, less cleaning. Don't talk to us like we're feeble old people, Prescott. I felt anger rising inside me. I'm 63. Your father is 65. We're perfectly capable of climbing stairs and cleaning a house. Our house. But Mom, Laurel interjected, where would we go? We have children, school, work. You had 5 years to find your own place, Garland said. 5 years to save for a down payment, just like you planned. What's changed? Prescott and Laurel exchanged glances, their faces taking on a strange expression, a mixture of guilt and irritation. Listen, Prescott said, raising his hands in a conciliatory gesture. Let's not rush into anything. If you're uncomfortable in the annex, we can work something out. Maybe we could renovate it, expand it. At our expense, of course, I added bitterly. Well, you have your pensions, Heather remarked, and we have children to raise. I felt Garland tense up beside me. His patience was wearing thin. You both have jobs, he said. So do your spouses. You can easily support yourselves. Millions of other families do. But housing is so expensive, Laurel exclaimed. You see the news. You know what rents are like these days. Yes, we do, I nodded. And we know you could easily afford to rent an apartment if you didn't spend money on unnecessary things. A new pickup truck, expensive curtains, catered parties. So you're keeping track of our spending? Prescott frowned. It's our money. We can spend it however we want. Of course, I agreed. Just like we can do whatever we want with our house, and we want to live in it. Alone. You can't just kick us out. Laurel raised her voice. We're your children. You have obligations to us. My obligations ended when you turned 18, I said firmly. You're over 40 and 30 now. You're adults, and it's high time you started living on your own. Laurel looked as if I had hit her. Her eyes filled with tears. How can you say that? After everything we've done for you? What have you done for us? Garland asked quietly. In the last 5 years, name one thing. There was a long silence. Prescott and Laurel exchanged glances again, but this time there was panic in their eyes. We're family, Prescott finally said. We have to support each other. Isn't that what you taught us, Mom? Support, yes, I nodded. Use, no. That's not fair. Laurel threw up her hands. We're not using you. We're just helping each other. How exactly are you helping us? Garland asked. By living in our house for free? By letting us pay all your bills? By giving you our savings for your whims? Dad, calm down. Prescott went on the offensive. You're being too emotional. Let's discuss this when you're both thinking rationally. It was an old trick. Pretending we were out of our minds, that our demands were just the whims of elderly people. But this time it didn't work. We're perfectly rational, I said, opening the folder. So much so that we consulted a lawyer. Here is the official eviction notice. You have 30 days to vacate the premises. I took out 2 copies of the document, one for Prescott and Heather, the other for Laurel and Dwayne. Garland and I had filled them out before coming, though we had hoped we wouldn't have to use them. But now it was clear there was no other way. Prescott took the sheet and scanned it. His face paled. You're serious? He looked at me incredulously. You're willing to throw your own children and grandchildren out on the street? Take us to court? We're not throwing you out on the street, Garland said. We're giving you a month to find another place to live. That's more than generous. Generous? Laurel almost shouted. You call this generous? Throwing your own children out of their home? The home you've been living in for free for 5 years, I reminded her. More than enough time to get on your feet. What about the children? Heather interrupted. Have you thought about your grandchildren? How will this affect them? Our grandchildren will be fine, Garland said. Children adapt faster than adults, and besides, they can always visit us. We're not saying we don't want to see them, we just want our house back. That's unbelievable. Prescott shook his head. Your own mother is threatening us with a lawsuit. Wonderful, just wonderful. No one is threatening you. I tried to sound calm, though my heart was pounding like crazy. We are simply informing you of our plans and your rights. If you vacate the house voluntarily, there will be no lawsuit. And if you don't? What then, Mom? Call the police? Have your daughter arrested? No one is going to arrest anyone, Garland said wearily. But if you refuse to comply with the law, we will go to court, and the court will issue an eviction order which will be enforced by the sheriff's deputies. This is not a threat, Laurel. It is simply information about how the law works. The law, Prescott sneered bitterly. So now we live by the law and not by our conscience? Not as a family? A family is when all members respect each other, I said, when there's no exploitation or manipulation, when grown children live their own lives instead of sponging off their parents. Sponging off you? Laurel jumped up from the couch. You're calling us sponges? After everything we've done for you? What have you done for us, Laurel? Garland asked quietly. Name one specific thing. Laurel opened her mouth, then closed it. Her face contorted with anger. You know what? Fine. Okay. You want us to leave? We'll leave. But don't think we'll ever speak to you again. You're dead to us, and you'll never see your grandchildren. Her words hit me like a slap in the face. I knew the conversation would be difficult, but I hadn't expected such threats. Laurel, Garland began, but she cut him off. No, Dad, don't. You made your choice. Now go live with him. She ran out of the room, slamming the door behind her. We heard her footsteps on the stairs, then another slam. Her bedroom door. She's just upset, said Dwayne, who had been silent the whole time. Give her time to cool off. Time, repeated Prescott. Yes, we all need time. To realize that our parents have betrayed us. Betrayed us? I couldn't believe my ears. For wanting to live in our own house? For throwing us out on the street? Prescott raised his voice. For threatening us with court. For calling your own children parasites. Prescott, Garland said quietly but firmly, we're not throwing anyone out. You have a month to find a place to live. That's more than enough time, considering you both have stable incomes. What about the down payment and the security deposit? Heather interrupted. Do you have any idea how much it costs to rent a decent apartment these days? We can help with the down payment, I said, as a one-time thing, but after that, you'll have to manage on your own. Garland and I discussed this beforehand. We didn't want to leave the children without support, but we couldn't continue to support them either. So you're buying us out? Prescott shook his head. Great, Mom. Very motherly. His words hurt me, but I didn't show it. Think what you want, Prescott, but you've been given notice. The clock is ticking. 30 days from today. I stood up and Garland followed suit. We'll be at our place if you want to talk, he said, calmly, like adults. We left the house, leaving the children to digest the news. As soon as the door closed behind us, I felt my legs give way. Garland supported me by the elbow. You did well, Mary, he said quietly. You held your ground. They'll never forgive us, I whispered. Did you hear, Laurel? We'll never see our grandchildren again. It's just emotions, Garland shook his head. They'll cool down. They'll understand that we're right. Maybe not right away, but they'll understand. I wanted to believe him, but the fear of losing my children and grandchildren gripped my heart in an icy vice. Back in the annex, I sat down on the bed and burst into tears. All the tension, all the fear, all the pain of the last few days came pouring out. Garland sat down next to me and put his arms around my shoulders. Everything will be all right, Mary, he repeated. We did the right thing. We couldn't go on like this. I knew he was right. I knew there was no other way out, but that didn't make it any easier. I could hear voices coming from the main house. Prescott and Laurel seemed to be arguing. Then I heard crying. It sounded like Amber. My heart ached even more. My grandchildren. How would this affect them? Maybe we're rushing into this, I whispered. Maybe we should give them more time. We're giving them a month, Mary, Garland said. That's plenty of time. And we offered to help with the down payment. We're not abandoning them. I nodded, wiping away my tears. He was right, of course. But then why did it hurt so much? The evening passed in agonizing anticipation. I thought one of the children would come to talk, but no one appeared. There was noise coming from the main house. They were probably holding a family council. Sometimes the voices rose, but I couldn't make out the words. Around 9 o'clock, there was a knock at the door. I started. Garland went to open it. Standing in the doorway was Kenneth, our eldest grandson. Hello, Grandpa, he said quietly. Can I come in? Garland let him in. I quickly wiped my eyes and tried to smile. "Hello, dear. How are you?" Kenneth shifted from foot to foot, clearly feeling uncomfortable. "Fine, I guess. Dad and Aunt Laurel say you're kicking us out." I sighed. Of course, the children had dramatized everything. "We're not kicking you out, Kenneth. We just want to go back to our house, to live a normal life like any other family." "But can't we all live together?" he asked. "Like we do now?" "Sweetie," I said, walking over to him and taking his hand, "normal families don't live like this. Grown children need their own homes, their own lives. And Grandpa and I need to be able to live in our house, not in an addition." Kenneth frowned. "But Dad says you betrayed us, that you're selfish." It hurt to hear that, especially from my grandson, but I tried to stay calm. "Your dad is upset, and that's understandable. Change is always scary. But believe me, we're not doing anything wrong. We just want our lives back." "What about us?" His voice sounded alarmed. "Where will we go?" "You'll find a new home," said Garland. "Maybe an apartment or a small house to rent. We'll help with the down payment, and you can always visit us." "Nothing will change except your address." Kenneth nodded, but his face showed that he didn't really believe it. "Dad says we won't be in touch with you anymore." I gasped. So Prescott really did plan to cut off all contact. "That will be his decision," Garland said firmly, "but I hope that when emotions have cooled, everyone will realize that family ties are more important than hurt feelings." Kenneth paused, then suddenly asked, "Grandma, why didn't you say anything before, if you were so unhappy in the annex?" That simple question caught me off guard. Why hadn't we? Why did we put up with it for years? Keep quiet, let the children use us? "I think we were afraid," I replied honestly. "Afraid of conflict. Afraid that you would stop loving us if we stopped doing everything for you. It was stupid, of course." "I won't stop loving you," Kenneth said unexpectedly, "even if we move away. You're my grandparents." I felt tears welling up in my eyes again, but this time they were tears of relief. "Thank you, sweetheart. That means a lot to us." Kenneth shrugged awkwardly. "Well, I have to go. Dad doesn't know I'm here. He'll be angry if he finds out." "You can always come back whenever you want," Garland said, "no matter what your father thinks." Kenneth nodded and headed for the door. At the threshold, he turned around. "You know, I think you're right. It's been a long time coming for us to start living on our own. I just didn't know how to say it." With that, he left, leaving Garland and me in amazement. Coming from a 17-year-old, it sounded particularly striking. "Maybe it's not so bad," Garland said when we were alone. "If even Kenneth understands." I nodded, feeling a strange mixture of emotions. Pain at the children's reaction, guilt for causing them suffering, but also a surprising sense of liberation. It was as if a heavy burden I had been carrying for years was slowly being lifted from my shoulders. "Whatever happens next," I said, taking Garland's hand, "we did the right thing, didn't we?" "Yes," he confirmed, squeezing my hand, "and we'll get through this, together." I nodded, looking out the window at our house, the house that would soon be ours again. Despite the pain, despite the fear of losing my children, I felt like I was doing something for myself for the first time in many years. And it was a strange, frightening, but at the same time wonderfully right feeling. I woke up earlier than usual. I had been restless, plagued by nightmares all night long. In one, Laurel was standing in the rain with the children, holding them close and crying. In another, Prescott was screaming that I wasn't his mother. I woke up in a cold sweat around 5 in the morning and couldn't get back to sleep. Garland was sleeping next to me, his breathing steady and calm. I got up carefully, trying not to wake him, and went into the tiny kitchen. I made some tea and sat by the window, looking at the house, where everyone seemed to still be asleep. I couldn't get yesterday's conversation out of my head, the faces of the children when we handed them the eviction notices. Prescott's anger, Laurel's hysterics, Heather and Dwayne's confusion, and Kenneth, who came to talk despite his father's prohibition. I took a sip of tea and grimaced. It was too hot, just like the situation we were in. I knew we were doing the right thing, but that didn't make it any easier. Suddenly, it dawned on me. I could take one more step, A final act of maternal care that would also be a final separation. Find them a place to live, help with the down payment, not out of guilt but out of practical considerations, to make sure they really moved out on time. I took out my laptop and opened some real estate websites. Redwood Springs was a small town, but there were plenty of listings. I started looking for options that would work for the Prescott and Laurel families. Prescott, Heather, and their children needed a 3-bedroom house, preferably close to the school where Kenneth and Tessa were studying. For Laurel and her family, something similar but perhaps a little smaller, as Zach and Amber could share a room. I made a few bookmarks noting potential options and even called a couple of numbers to inquire about availability and conditions. By 7 in the morning, when Garland woke up, I already had a list of 5 suitable options for each family. "What are you doing?" he asked, yawning and stretching. I told him about my idea. Garland listened without interrupting, then scratched his chin thoughtfully. "Are you sure this is a good idea, Mary? They might take it as another humiliation, or as an attempt to control their lives." I shook my head. "I'm not going to make any decisions for them. I'll just show them the options they can afford, and offer to help with the down payment, like we promised yesterday." Garland sighed. "All right, if you think it'll help. But let's have breakfast first. Hard conversations are twice as hard on an empty stomach." We made breakfast, eggs and bacon with toast. We ate in silence, each lost in our own thoughts. I thought about the upcoming conversation, imagined the children's reactions, and ran through possible scenarios in my head. When we finished, I put the printed housing options in a folder and added the bank statement showing that we had the funds to help with the down payment. Around 9 in the morning, we were ready to go to the main house. Unlike last night, today I felt strangely calm. Perhaps the hardest part, announcing the eviction, was already behind us. Or maybe I had finally accepted the inevitability of breaking up with my children and was ready to see it through to the end. We left the annex and headed for the main house. The day was clear and warm, and birds were singing in the treetops. Nature seemed oblivious to our family drama. To my surprise, the front door was unlocked. We went in and heard voices coming from the kitchen. Everyone was there. Prescott and Heather, Laurel and Dwayne, even the children who usually slept late in the morning. When we appeared in the kitchen doorway, the conversation stopped instantly. Everyone turned to face us, and I felt a chill run down my spine from their looks. Wary, hostile, hurt. "Good morning," I said, trying to keep my voice sound normal. "Can we talk?" "About what?" Prescott asked coldly. Everything was said quite clearly yesterday. I noticed that Laurel's eyes were swollen and red. She had obviously been crying all night. Heather nervously crumpled a napkin in her hands. Dwayne stared into his coffee cup, avoiding my gaze. The children also looked depressed. Even little Amber, usually so cheerful, sat with a gloomy expression, poking at her plate with her fork. Kenneth glanced at me and nodded slightly, a secret greeting that no one but me noticed. "We'd like to continue yesterday's conversation," Garland said, in a more constructive vein. "Constructive?" Laurel smiled bitterly. "After you kicked us out of our home?" "We're not kicking anyone out," I said, trying to sound calm. "We're asking you to find your own place, like all adults do, and we're willing to help." I placed a folder with printouts on the table. "What's that?" Prescott asked warily. "Housing options you can afford," I replied. I found several suitable options for each family, all within the city, close to the children's schools and your workplaces. Laurel snorted. "Seriously, Mom? You get to decide where we live now?" "I'm not deciding anything," I said patiently. "It's just information. You can use it or not. It's up to you." Prescott took the folder and began looking through it. His eyebrows rose in surprise. "Did you call the landlords?" "Some of them, yes," I nodded, to see if they were still available and what the terms were. "And they're willing to rent to us?" Prescott looked surprised. "Of course," I shrugged. "Why wouldn't they? You both have good credit and stable jobs." "What about the down payment?" Heather asked. "You know they usually ask for 2 or 3 months' rent plus a security deposit." "We'll help with that," Garland said, "like we promised yesterday. Consider it our parting gift." The last words came out with difficulty. I saw his lips tremble. There was a moment of silence. The children looked at each other, not knowing what to say. The grandchildren watched their parents' reactions warily. "But why did you choose these options?" Laurel finally asked, having also glanced at the folder. "Why not something better?" "Because this is what you can afford on your income," I replied simply. "I calculated your approximate family budgets based on what you told me about your salaries." "You've been keeping track of our finances?" Prescott frowned. "No, I just listened to what you said." I shook my head. "And I used common sense. The standard rule is that housing shouldn't cost more than 30% of your income. Otherwise, you won't be able to live comfortably." That's an invasion of our privacy," Prescott muttered, but without much conviction. "It's concern," Garland objected. "A last act of parental concern, if you will. After this, you'll be completely on your own." I took another envelope out of my bag and placed it on the table. "What else?" Laurel asked wearily. "Checks," I replied, "one for each family. Enough for a down payment and deposit on any of the options we've suggested." Prescott took the envelope and looked inside. His eyes widened. "Are you serious?" He pulled out the check and showed it to Heather. This is a lot." "Enough to start a new life," I nodded. "No debts, no obligations, a clean slate." "What if we don't want to move anywhere?" Laurel asked defiantly. "If we decide to fight, we have rights." "What rights, Laurel?" Garland asked quietly. "The house belongs to us. There are no documents giving you the right to live here. If it goes to court, the decision will not be in your favor." "But we're your children," she exclaimed. "Doesn't that mean anything?" "It does," I said softly. "That's exactly why we're doing this. Because you're our children, and we want you to finally grow up. To start living on your own, like normal people your age." "So you're doing this for our own good?" Prescott smirked. "How noble of you, Mom." His sarcasm stung, but I held back. "No, Prescott. I'm doing this for myself and Garland first and foremost, because we deserve respect and peace in our own home. But yes, in the long run, it will be better for you too. You'll finally be truly independent." Laurel opened her mouth to argue, but Dwayne suddenly put his hand on her shoulder. "Laurel, maybe that's enough," he said quietly. "Your parents are offering us real help. Let's at least look at these options before we turn them down." I looked at Dwayne in surprise. Usually quiet and unobtrusive, he rarely interfered in family conversations. But now, there was an unexpected firmness in his voice. Laurel looked at her husband in confusion but said nothing. "I agree with Dwayne," Kenneth said suddenly. "Grandma and Grandpa are giving us a chance to start over. Maybe it's not such a bad idea." "Kenneth!" Prescott looked sternly at his son. "Don't interfere in adult conversations." "I'm almost 18, Kenneth retorted, "and I have a right to express my opinion, especially when it concerns our family." I felt a surge of pride for my grandson. He was showing more maturity than his father. "Maybe Kenneth is right," Heather said unexpectedly, supporting him. "Maybe it really is time for us to start living our own lives. We're not a young family that needs help from our parents anymore." Prescott looked at his wife in surprise. "You too? I thought we were on the same page." "We're in this together," Heather nodded. "But maybe your parents are right about something. We really have been living off them for too long. 5 years, Prescott. 5 years we've been living in their house. They pay the bills, help with the kids. It's not normal." "But we're a family," he stubbornly repeated. "Families are supposed to support each other." "Support, yes," Heather said, "but not sponge off each other. Let's be honest. That's what we've been doing for the last few years." I looked at my sister-in-law with new respect. I never would have thought Heather would be on our side. We don't, Prescott stammered, not knowing how to respond. "Take a look at these options," Garland suggested, pointing to the folder. "They're really not bad, and quite affordable." Prescott reluctantly took the folder and began looking through the printouts. Laurel peered over his shoulder, still frowning, but without the same hostility. "This one looks okay," Prescott muttered, pointing to one of the options. 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, a garage, and really close to the school," I added. "Only a 10-minute walk." "I like this one," Heather said, pointing to another printout. "Look, it even has a small garden, and they allow pets." "Tessa has always wanted a dog," Kenneth remarked, "but we can't have one because of Grandma's allergies." I smiled guiltily. My allergy to dog hair had always been a stumbling block. My grandchildren dreamed of having a dog, but because of me, they couldn't have one. "You can get a puppy in this house," I said, "if you're willing to take care of it, of course." "Really?" Tessa's eyes lit up. "We can get a dog?" "If our parents say so," Garland clarified. "Well, theoretically," Prescott began, but Heather interrupted him. "Of course we can. I've always wanted a dog as much as you have, sweetie." Tessa clapped her hands happily, and I saw Prescott's face soften. Perhaps the prospect of making his daughter happy reconciled him a little to the idea of moving. Meanwhile, Laurel was exploring options for her family. "This one looks nice," she said, pointing to one of them, "but it's farther from downtown." "It's close to the park," I pointed out, "and to the music school Amber goes to." "And the rent is lower," Dwayne added, looking at the printout. "We could save the difference for a down payment on our own place." "Do you really think we'll ever be able to buy our own house?" Laurel asked doubtfully. "Of course," Dwayne replied confidently, "if we plan our budget right and save a little bit every month." I noticed Laurel look at her husband with surprise and respect. It seemed like Dwayne was revealing a new side of himself that she hadn't noticed before. "Well, let's say these options are really good," Prescott said, closing the folder. "But what about furniture? Appliances? Everything you need to live a normal life?" "You have furniture," Garland said, "the stuff you brought with you when you moved here, and the stuff you've bought over the years." "But most of the furniture in the house is yours," Prescott objected. "And it's staying here," I nodded. "But everything you bought, the wardrobes in the kids' rooms, the new sofa in the living room, the kitchen cabinets Heather picked out, all of that is yours. You can take it with you." "Really?" Heather looked surprised. "But the kitchen cabinets, they're built in." "We can hire professionals to remove it and install it in your new place," Garland said. "It's no problem." "What about the appliances?" Dwayne asked. "The refrigerator, washing machine, dishwasher?" "Most of the appliances were purchased by you as well," I replied. "You can take whatever you want. Garland and I will buy new things." "But what about you?" Laurel asked suddenly. "You'll be left with no furniture, no appliances?" I almost laughed at the irony of the situation. For the first time in a long time, Laurel expressed concern about us rather than herself. "We'll manage," Garland said. "We have savings, and our old furniture is in the attic. It's not very fashionable, but it's perfectly functional. And besides," I added, "we can furnish the house gradually, according to our own tastes, without having to take into account the wishes of all the family members." Prescott tapped his fingers thoughtfully on the table. "But if we agree to move, will you visit us, or is it over? All communication?" I looked at my son in surprise. There was uncertainty in his voice, almost fear. "Of course we will," I said softly. "You're our children. We love you. And your grandchildren, too. Nothing will change that. But you're kicking us out." Prescott looked confused. "We're not kicking you out," Garland repeated patiently. "We just want you to live your life and us live ours, like normal, healthy families. We can come visit you," I added. "Have family dinners on the weekends if you want, help with the grandchildren when you need to get away or just relax, but we won't live together anymore." Prescott and Laurel exchanged glances. Something changed in their faces, as if they were beginning to understand what was really happening. "So, you're not giving up on us?" Laurel asked quietly. "Of course not." I shook my head. "We're just setting healthy boundaries we should have set years ago." Laurel nodded, staring at the table. I guess I behaved terribly," she muttered. "Yesterday, and in general." "We've all made mistakes," Garland said, "but now we have a chance to make things right, to start over, on new terms." When do we need to move out?" Prescott asked, and for the first time I heard acceptance in his voice. "The notice says 30 days, I replied. "But if you need a little more time to get organized, moving, repairs at the new place, we can work something out." "No," Prescott said unexpectedly firmly. 30 days is fair. If we start looking for a place now, we can get everything done in time." I looked at my son in surprise. Something had changed in him overnight. It was as if he had finally decided to grow up. I'll look at those options today, he added, and I'll contact the landlords. The sooner we start, the better. Me too, Laurel nodded. I think the one near the park would be good for Dwayne and me. We'll have to see it in person. I can call and set up a viewing, I offered, if you want. No, Laurel shook her head. You've done enough, Mom. We can handle the rest ourselves. Those words, "we'll manage," were music to my ears. Finally, my children were speaking like responsible adults. Okay, I smiled, but if you need any help, we're always here for you. Thank you, Prescott said, and there was genuine gratitude in his voice. For everything, for finding these options, for the checks, for not letting us continue living like this. I felt a lump rise in my throat. For the first time in a long time, Prescott spoke to me like a son, not a demanding tenant. You're welcome, I said, trying to keep my voice from shaking. We love you, remember that. And we love you, Laurel replied quietly, even if we don't always show it. I saw tears glisten in her eyes, and I wanted to hug her like I did when we were children. But I held back. Right now, it was important to keep my distance, to give them space to make their own decisions. Well, Garland said, standing up, I think we've said everything we wanted to say. The rest is up to you. We left the kitchen and headed for the door. Kenneth caught up with me at the door. Grandma? He said quietly. Thank you. For what, dear? For making them grow up, he smiled. I think it was about time they did that. I hugged my grandson, feeling my eyes fill with tears. I'm going to miss you, I whispered. Me too, he replied. But we'll see each other, won't we? You promised. Of course we will, I nodded. You can always come visit us whenever you want. Kenneth smiled and ran back to the kitchen where his family was already busy discussing moving options. Garland and I went outside and slowly walked to the annex. The day was still clear and beautiful, but now it seemed even brighter. You did well, Mary, Garland said, taking my hand. Your plan worked even better than we expected. I'm not sure it was my doing, I replied. Maybe they just needed a push, a chance to see that they really can live on their own. In any case, Garland squeezed my hand, it looks like we'll be returning to our home soon and starting a new chapter in our lives. I nodded, feeling a strange mixture of emotions, relief that the hardest part was over, pride in the children who had finally decided to grow up, and a touch of sadness at the impending separation. But the feeling of liberation prevailed, as if the heavy chains I had been wearing for years were finally beginning to slip away. I had helped my children for the last time, not out of guilt or duty, but out of love, and a desire for them to finally become truly independent. And now, for the first time in many years, I felt that I had done the right thing, both as a mother and as a person with a right to my own life. Entering the annex, Garland and I sat down at our little table and looked at each other. It was a strange feeling, as if we had just returned from an important mission, a mission that changed not only our lives, but also the lives of our children. Do you think they'll be okay? I asked, pouring us some tea. Garland shook his head thoughtfully. You know, I'm surprised, but I think so. Something changed in them today, especially in Prescott. It was as if he had finally accepted responsibility for his life. I nodded. I had noticed the change too. My son, who had always demanded and expected everything to be done for him, had suddenly started thinking like a mature, responsible adult. And Laurel, Garland continued, she seems to have seen Dwayne for the first time not just as a man who doesn't make much money, but as a partner she can rely on. Yes, I agreed. You know, maybe this move will really do them good. They'll start to appreciate each other more, work as a team, and learn to appreciate what they have, Garland added. Without constant parental support, they'll have to be more responsible with money, plan a budget. I took a sip of tea, thinking about how strange everything had turned out. When we started this conversation yesterday, I was sure that the children would react negatively to our decision, that we would have to literally push them out of the house. But today's surprise, the housing options and financial assistance, seemed to open their eyes to the reality of the situation. You know what surprised me the most? I said. Kenneth's reaction. He seemed happy. Children often see things that adults don't notice. Garland nodded. Maybe he's known for a long time that the situation wasn't healthy, that his parents were too dependent on us. And he'll be happy to get a dog, I smiled, remembering how Tessa's eyes lit up at the mention of a puppy. Yes, that too, Garland laughed. See, there are already some positive aspects. We sat sipping tea and discussing plans for the future, how we would arrange the house when the children moved out, what rooms we would need, what furniture we should buy, and what we could keep. For the first time in a long time, we talked about our house as ours, without having to consider the needs and desires of the entire extended family. I think you could make your study in Prescott's old room, I said. It has good lighting and enough space for your workbench. And the second bedroom upstairs could be turned into a guest room, suggested Garland, for when the grandchildren want to stay overnight. There was something special about this conversation, a sense of new possibilities, of freedom to plan our future the way we wanted, not the way circumstances dictated. Through the window, I saw Prescott leave the house and get into his car. He was probably going to look at one of the houses. He was moving quickly. That was a good sign. You know, I said, watching his pickup truck pull out of the driveway, I think they're really going to make it work, and maybe our relationship will even get better. Maybe, Garland nodded. Sometimes distance helps people appreciate each other more. I sighed, feeling an invisible weight lift off my shoulders. The last 2 days had been some of the most emotionally charged in years. Fear, determination, conflict, reconciliation. It was all mixed together in a strange cocktail of feelings that I was still trying to make sense of. But one thing I knew for sure, we had made the right decision. Not just for ourselves, but for our children. Sometimes the greatest act of love is to let people go their own way, even if that way lies away from your home. Garland covered my hand with his and smiled. Everything will be okay, Mary. We've been through a lot together, and we'll get through this too. I nodded, squeezing his hand in response. My quiet, reliable Garland, the man who had always been there no matter what. Yes, I agreed. Everything will be okay. And for the first time in a long time, I truly believed it.